Following the capture of Bear, most Texian soldiers returned home to celebrate Christmas with kith and kin. Without friends or family in Texas, the American volunteers were at loose ends. Out of their tedium grew the scheme for the Matamoros expedition, an episode that demonstrated that idle hands really were the devil's workshop. Notwithstanding the strategic advantage that Texians would enjoy if they did manage to capture the town, the excursion ultimately produced the collapse of the Texas provisional government and the near annihilation of the Texian army. Matamoros was a tantalizing prize. By the late 1820s, the town served as the financial and trade hub in the south-north trade routes between the Mexican interior and Texas. The upriver settlements, or Villas del Norte, deposited their goods there before placing them on ocean-going vessels. The port of Matamoros was northern Mexico's gateway to the rest of the world. Likewise, it was the world's gateway to northern Mexico. Tremendous revenue streams flowed through the area as the consequence of escalating European trade. Commerce from the United States, especially that generated out of New Orleans, further contributed to the bounty. Matamoros merchants, by virtue of their location, acumen, and industry, had forged lasting and lucrative links between northern Mexico and the grasping merchants of the United States. To many Texians, Matamoros seemed a rich plum, ripe for the picking. Not only would it give the unruly American volunteer units something to do, the port was an essential source of much-needed income. If Texian forces were able to lay hands on the town's proceeds, they might then employ them to discharge the mounting war debt. Some argued that if the Centralists should launch another campaign into Texas, rebels could employ the town's strategic location to repel the enemy's advance. If, moreover, Matamoros were under Texian control, they could use it as a base of operations to mount their own offensive into the Mexican interior. Those caught up in the heat of what General Sam Houston called Matamoros fever seldom considered the many obstacles standing in the way of their quixotic scheme. During the siege of Bear, Texian officials had found it almost impossible to supply their fighting men. But now, the victors of San Antonio were calling for an offensive against the Mexican port on the far bank of the Rio Grande. Exactly how the government would equip a Texian army at such distance did not seem to have been an issue of concern. Although Governor Henry Smith and the council favored the broad notion, they could not agree on a commander. General Sam Houston was a Smith crony, but believed, correctly, that the council would not endorse his candidacy. Houston offered command to James Bowie, the victor of Concepcion, but he turned him down. The council appointed Frank W. Johnson, who first rode to San Felipe seeking sanction for the excursion. Upon receiving an ironclad endorsement, he began to have second thoughts. While Johnson dithered, council members tapped James W. Fannin to command, but he was unable to attract a sufficient number of volunteers. Houston and Johnson again offered their services, seeking the consent of both Governor Smith and the council. Yet like a recurring nightmare. Neither prospective leader could recruit enough men. Dismayed with the backbiting and ineptitude, Houston withdrew his name from consideration and accepted an appointment as commissioner to the Cherokees. Smith and the council were at loggerheads. Soldiers in the field awaited instructions from officials who seemed to be incapable of making any decision. Johnson camped at San Patricio with some 100 volunteers, while Fannin took up winter quarters at Refugio. On January 6, 1836, Houston informed Smith that Johnson, before retiring to San Patricio, had stripped the Bayard garrison of vital supplies. In Houston's opinion, gallant soldiers, many of them still bearing the wounds from the December fighting, had suffered depredations at the hand of one who was little better than a bandit chief.
The brave men who have been wounded in the battles of Texas and the sick from exposure in her cause, without blankets or supplies, are left neglected in her hospitals, while the needful stores and supplies are diverted from them, without authority, by self-created officers who do not acknowledge the only government known to Texas and the world.
A source of contention and confusion at the time, the so-called Matamoros expedition remains perplexing. In truth, there never was a Matamoros expedition, inasmuch as a Texian force never marched a mile toward Matamoros. All San Felipe officials could do was argue about it. It would be more accurate to call it the proposed Matamoros expedition. No matter what one chooses to label it, the machinations surrounding the design would have pernicious and lasting consequences. Upon receiving Houston's letter, Governor Smith could hardly control his anger. He convinced himself that the council had been in cahoots with Johnson, approving his sack of Bayard while keeping all concealed from him. In clear and forceful terms, the governor determined to confront the members of the council. His actions were about to topple the provisional government.